I was told that we would be playing a 10 to 15 minute demo experience. But as it turns out, is quite a lot more than that. And between a gameplay level and a wave-based secondary mode that we tried after, I ended up playing for probably close to an hour. I was pleasantly surprised when I arrived and found out that we were in fact going to be playing on a PlayStation VR2. And once I put the headset on, it was very obvious to see why. The thing absolutely looks and runs great. It uses every bit of the capability of the platform to deliver a next-gen VR experience. The studio were quite proud to tell me that they do use dynamic foveated rendering to produce 90 frames per second natively, not only for the demo, but obviously the game when it launches. But the level of detail was strikingly high, and I would call this game, I would describe it as cinematic. The environments, the enemies, everything looked top-notch and just beautiful. The trailer is a pretty accurate depiction of the level I played. Now, with that said, they were very open about the fact that the demo we played was not a level from the game. It was something that was specifically built up to be a demo, and it contained a lot of areas and assets from the game. But this was a specially made demo for people to just get an idea of what the game has to offer. But no, everything I saw was snowy. The levels themselves feel pretty wide open and spacious, but all paths do lead to the same endpoints. The studio refers to this game as being wide linear. So it is linear, but it doesn't feel linear when you're playing it. You're in these wide open spaces with mountains towering all around you, and you do come to forks in the road where maybe you can walk down the path to the left or use your grapple hook to climb to the right. But at the end of the day, you'll always find yourself ending up in the same place. It's a bit of a step back from the levels of inventory and depth of its predecessor, The Walking Dead. This is a different type of game. With that said, there is some light exploration and resource gathering, and there is some light crafting. The demo that I played, though, only gave us a bit of an introduction to that, as the only thing that you could find were these herbs that you found growing on the ground from time to time. The only thing that you could craft is a medicinal power-up. Beyond that, there are also collectibles that you'll find scattered throughout the levels. Some of them are easy to find, others are not so easy to find. Obviously, with my playing this for nearly an hour, I took my time examining and exploring the level, and they told me when I finished that I was the only person up to that point that had found all of the collectibles. And in this demo, which, you know, for a normal person probably would have taken 20 to 30 minutes to play through, I did find 3 collectibles. 2 of them were normal, and then there was another, a special one that was golden figurine. But in terms of the game, they told me that occasionally exploration will lead you to find optional puzzle areas where you'll be required to kind of work through physical puzzles in order to make it to the end and find the collectible as a reward. Well, compared to a recent PlayStation VR release like Legendary Tales, the block and parry melee actually feels quite similar to that. It is a bit different with Skydance's Behemoth, though, as your character, Ren, finds himself afflicted with the same rot that has driven all of these villagers mad. For some reason, you've been able to keep your mind, and not only have you been able to keep your mind, but you also are gaining strength and power from the rot. If you just engaged in normal battle with these insane villagers, it can be quite challenging. But I think the hook with Skydance's Behemoth is there's this power up mode. I don't even know what the name of the mode is specifically, but there's this power up mode that you can engage, and it gives you strength. And when you engage that, and it only lasts for a few seconds, but when you engage that power up mode, you become almost superhuman. And the game very quickly becomes this dark power fantasy where you can just rip and tear and smash anything in your path. And I think that that's what they're going for here. The levels themselves, if you rely heavily on your power up function, the levels themselves aren't extremely challenging, but the boss fights are a different thing entirely. Well, the grapple mechanic is, quite frankly, what sets a game like this apart from a title like Legendary Tales or any other type of block and parry melee based game. The grapple mechanic is used heavily, not only in traversing the levels, but in battle as well. And it feels great. The demo itself, though, while it had haptics enabled, they weren't specifically very refined. They were pretty basic, but they told me at launch that the haptics would be refined and much more noticeable and immersive. But the grapple mechanic feels great. The game itself is built around that grapple mechanic. In fact, while I was playing, they were constantly encouraging me to use it more. You know, it was my natural tendency just to try to fight these guys in a straight up sword fight without using my grappling hook or without using my power up ability. And I found it challenging and fun. But these guys the whole time were cheering me on, trying to get me to shoot these enemies in the face with my grappling hook, or maybe even grab some piece of level geometry behind the enemy and pull it into them. You can scorpion these guys and pull them towards you, and much more. And that was something that they were particularly proud of. You can literally slice off limbs. You can slice off enemies' faces, and everything that you do, especially when you have your power up enabled. Everything you do is quite brutal and graphic and borderline gory. They were really trying to get me to lean into the whole power fantasy side of things here, and I was very much approaching it as if I were playing something like Legendary Tales. So you can fight these enemies, and obviously when you slay them, you can pick up whatever it was they were attacking you with, be it a sword and shield, or a battle axe, or even a bow and arrow. You can pick up whatever they have and use it for yourself. But you have special weapons that you'll encounter throughout the game called hero weapons. And your hero weapons have special abilities and special traits that you can progress as you go through the game. And there is a little bit of customization involved with regard to how you want to progress your weapons, what kind of traits and abilities, attributes you want to add to them. And as you can see from some of this footage here, the very first weapon you find in the game, the sword, is a hero weapon. And you have the ability to cast this weapon and throw it at an enemy and then retrieve it with like a force grab from distances up to like 20 to 30, maybe even 40 feet away from you. So you kind of have this boomerang effect with your first sword that you find. And this is just the first example of what I'm told are a few hero weapons that you'll encounter throughout the game. The shopkeeper was the crafting tutorial. And the crafting, as I mentioned before, is quite basic. Literally, you pull the items directly out of your inventory and put into like this little sack thing. You grab it, you shake it, and it magically becomes the item that you're trying to craft. Very, very basic. But again, this game is a very different game than the predecessor, the Walking Dead. This game is more about being a brutally visceral, cinematic action-adventure game.
Now shake the pouch a few times to craft the medicine. That's a good start.
Yes, the Behemoth boss fight is where I think that this game is really going to set itself apart from anything else that we've seen in the VR library to date. These things are just massive. Even the smaller, quote, baby Behemoth that I fought at the end of this level was just, towering over me hundreds of feet in the air. And it wasn't just like visually impressive. The way that they incorporated haptics and sound, and the way this thing kind of made an impact on the environment and the other enemies around you made you feel its size, its weight, and its power. But everyone had questions going into this thing if we were going to be able to scale these things similarly to a game like Shadow of the Colossus, and I'm happy to say that that absolutely is the case, and it seems to be a central feature of these boss fights, is that each one of them is likely going to have a different way that you can scale it to get on eye level with these things and attack them in their weak points. Without giving too much away about the process of defeating the Behemoth that I fought, the general process was to find and identify a weak point, to break down the defenses around that weak point, and then make your way to that weak point so that you could attack it. I actually felt a bit safer there than I did when I was on the ground, and when this thing could literally smash you with its ball and chain or even just step on you without a moment's notice. So when you're actually hugging this thing and climbing up on its body, you feel so close to it that you feel a little bit safer than you do on the ground. But as you get a little bit higher up, and you look down and you realize just how high up you are in the air, you get that familiar feeling of vertigo that an immersive climbing game tends to give you. It's so massive. It's moving kind of slowly, but you feel the movement. I wouldn't call it super intense or anything. It was enough to keep you on your toes, and your senses heightened, so to speak. This feels like a premium game. It feels like a $60 game. It felt like, in terms of quality, it really reminded me a lot of Horizon Call of the Mountain, only with the handcuffs off. They didn't nerf this for newcomers. This is an intense experience. And then, while there is a lot of grappling and climbing in this game, the level design isn't built around the climbing so much. In many cases, it's optional. So they had a lot of the things that we liked about Horizon Call of the Mountain, but then minus the things that we didn't like. I did ask the developers about how long they expect it's going to take people to play through their game. They told me that on average it takes 10 to 12 hours to play through their game. I think they said that there were 4 main story chapters. Each story chapter has 3 acts each, and then at the end of each chapter you'll be facing a behemoth. Now, so that tells me that there's likely 4 behemoths in this game, but there could possibly be a 5th. Maybe there's a big bad at the end of it all. I was cautiously optimistic about this game, just based on the pedigree of Skydance games, and they've brought us what might be the best game that I've ever played in VR in the last generation. So I had pretty high hopes walking into it. I was a bit surprised that this is more of a visceral action game and a little bit less focused on, like crafting and exploration and the sort of things that Saints and Sinners had going for it. I was a bit concerned at first that they really weren't doing too much that was new. We've seen block and parry melee before. We've seen grappling hooks like this before in Everslot, for example. But the way they put it together and the way that the story has given your character this superhuman strength really sets the minute-to-minute gameplay apart. It's a level of power that really I've only felt, I want to say, in maybe a game like Synapse, where you're running through and you're just literally throwing enemies at will. So while the core gameplay mechanics are nothing new minute to minute, they definitely have put their own spin on it and have been able to develop a very unique core gameplay mechanic here. But with that said, this game isn't about the minute-to-minute gameplay. What really excited me coming out of the demo was the experience of not just fighting the Behemoth, but just being in the presence of the Behemoth is awe-inspiring. It's different. It's something unlike anything that I've experienced in VR to date. And I think that even the most skeptical VR gamer, as they play through this level or the first level of the game, as soon as they see this thing, and you will see it before you have to fight it, as soon as you see this thing and stand in its presence, I think everyone's going to realize what kind of a different experience that they're in for here.
Thought I could be a hero. But heroes don't survive the Forsaken Lands. Only monsters do.